What is your spiritual gift? For example, put up your hand if you're a prophet. Anybody prophets here? The worker of miracles. Anybody? You worked a miracle lately? Supernatural healing. What about supernatural healing? Anybody? It's interesting when we look at our reading from 1 Corinthians that all of these things are spiritual gifts that Paul mentions exist in the church, and yet it seems that we are hard-pressed to see ourselves in those categories. Now, why is that? What's going on? It might mean that in some way we are uninformed about the nature of spiritual gifts. Right? Maybe we think that the time of spiritual gifts has passed. Right? Nobody does these things anymore. There are no more prophets. There are no more healers. Right? And anybody who says that they can do these things are probably charlatans. After all, have you seen late night faith healers? So all the talk of spiritual gifts that might have been meaningful in Paul's day, but in our modern society, we're beyond that. Or maybe, we think that spiritual gifts and the language of spiritual gifts and the exercising of spiritual gifts, well, that's kind of so un-Anglican. Anglicans somehow are religiously predisposed against such ecstasies. I was at a diocesan council meeting the other day, and somebody put forward the phrase passionate Anglicans. And everybody kind of snickered as if that phrase is somehow an oxymoron. Like Anglicans just don't do this kind of thing. Maybe we think that spiritual gifts are only for the elite super Christians. Right? Prophecy, miracles, healing, these are quite the big gifts. And most of us, we might not really see ourselves in those categories. So again, we remove ourselves from what Paul is saying and think that whatever Paul says here doesn't actually mean anything to us. It doesn't address us. But Paul begins the passage by saying, I don't want you to be uninformed about spiritual gifts. Just like the church in Corinth, perhaps we need to be rightly informed about the reality of spiritual gifts in the church. And even if you don't see yourself as a prophet or as a discerner of gifts, does that mean that you are spiritually giftless? So this morning, let's talk about spiritual gifts. More specifically, let's talk about your spiritual gifts and your invitation to exercise them. I invite you to join with me in 1 Corinthians chapter 12. The first thing that we need to know is that spiritual gifts are rooted in the activity of the Holy Spirit. It's rooted in the activity of the Holy Spirit. In high school, I remember taking one of those job aptitude tests. You ever take one of those? Everyone in grade 11 had to take one of those, and in order to help us figure out what we were going to do after high school. And so we had to do this test based on our temperaments, based on our interests, and it was going to pump out an answer for us. And I don't remember what mine said, but it distinctly did not say an Anglican priest. But of course, a test would never say that, because it doesn't take into account the activity of the Holy Spirit upon someone's life. See, the Holy Spirit changes all the rules. You can think, I don't have anything to offer, right? I don't have any discernible gifts. God can't possibly use me in any sort of way. But you know what? The Holy Spirit changes all the rules. And if the Holy Spirit is involved and active in your life, then it means that you have a spiritual gift. And the Holy Spirit wants to work through you in a certain way. Now, you can go online and you can find a lot of spiritual gift tests and lists and stuff like that. And in the end, like a job aptitude test, some of these things will pump out what your gift is. I got exhortation, I got giving, I got, teaching, or whatever it might be. But in similar fashion, those tests, they don't actually take into account God's activity in your life. right? It can never actually articulate that sense of call, that sense of divine drawing to act or to give or to perform in a certain way. Because that's the first thing about spiritual gifts. It is what the Spirit is doing in you and through you. Paul says there's a variety of different gifts, but the same Spirit. There's a variety of different kinds of service, but the same Lord. There are different kinds of workings, but the same God works all of them in all people. So spiritual gifts, they are not some predefined category that you need to figure out how do you fit into based on your level of spirituality. You are spiritually gifted in the specific place where God is working through you. Your spiritual gift is the precise way that God calls you to further express your faith and share the presence and love of Jesus. Your spiritual gift is the precise place that God calls you to further express your faith and share the presence and love of Jesus. And did you notice the phrase, the same God works all of them in all people? As a follower of Jesus, as one who says by the Spirit, Jesus is Lord, as a member of the church, you are included in that phrase. And in case you missed it, Paul repeats it in verse 7. Now to each one, the manifestation of the Spirit is given for the common good. Now to each one. You have a spiritual gift. You are spiritually gifted. The Holy Spirit works in you, but more than that, the Holy Spirit works through you. But notice the subtle nuance that Paul says. You are gifted for the common good. It is an error to think that spiritual gifts are somehow divine merit badges, right? That's what was happening in the church in Corinth. People in Corinth were desiring to manifest that more ecstatic gifts. That's why Paul mentions prophecy and healing and discerning spirits, because that's what the people were going for. Because they thought that it meant that they were more spiritually elite than other people. Look at me, I can prophesy. Oh, how spiritual I am. I can discern spirits. So this is why Paul is educating them. This is why Paul starts talking all about spiritual gifts. And the way he concludes his talk on spiritual gift is by telling them, desire the greater gifts. And I will tell you how to do that. Then he says, if I speak in the tongues of angels, but have not love, I'm nothing. Your spiritual gifts is an expression of love. Expression of love for the church. It's an expression of God's love for this place. Think of it like this. Your spiritual gift is where your love for Jesus and your love for others meet. Your spiritual gift is where your love for Jesus and your love for others meet. Ask yourself, how does the Holy Spirit work through you for the good of the church? How does the Holy Spirit move through you in such a way to benefit those who are around you, to give life to others or to this place, to bless others? When we think of spiritual gifts as an individual quality that we possess, it's easy to let it lie dormant, right? Well, I have the gift of prophecy, and it just kind of sits there until I decide to prophesy. But if we see that it is a way that Christ works through us for the benefit of somebody else, for the benefit of the church, for the benefit of our common life, then it calls us to step forward in activity. And it calls us to engage in some sort of ministry. So how are you active in faith? How are you active in the church? Could the Holy Spirit be calling you to follow his prompting and to join some sort of ministry or group as an expression of your spiritual gifts? Studies have shown for the past years, volunteerism is continually down, and it's always going down. But imagine if we recognize what Paul is saying here. Just imagine what would happen if every member of the church kind of took up this call to be joined in some sort of ministry that exercised their spiritual gift in order to manifest the presence of God in this place and to bless others. Imagine how transformative a community like that would be. Is this too much of a stretch? Sometimes we think, well, that sounds good, but you know what? Like my gifts are not all that special. There's a common example regarding the building of a church. Who knows if it's true? But a man walked up to a construction site and asked the worker, "What are you doing?" And the worker said, "I'm laying bricks." He walked to another person and said, "Well, what are you doing?" And the worker said, "Well, I'm building a wall." He walked to a third construction worker and asked, "Well, what are you doing?" And the worker looked at him and said, "Well, I'm building a church." It can be tempting to think that the activities or the gifts that we engage in, well, they don't actually amount to much. Again, we think that spiritual gifts are the big elite ones. And whatever I can do here in this place, well, it's nothing more than just laying bricks. And so we downplay the spiritual impact of what we can offer. Right? Why join the altar guild? All they do is just iron linens. Right? Why join the choir? They just sing a couple ditties. Why teach Sunday school? After all they do is just play with kids. And all of this, it doesn't actually amount to much. And we're just kind of spinning our wheels. Except it does. It builds the church. These gifts are not just laying bricks or establishing walls. So Paul says that the Spirit works in us in a specific manner to build up the church. To one is given this, to one is given that, to one is giving something else. All of it, Paul says, is the work of the one and the same Spirit. For you to step forward in some sort of activity of ministry is to manifest the Spirit of God in a way which is unseen previously in this church. And this church will be blessed because of it. Those who are around us, those who are around you, will be blessed because of it. Where is the Spirit prompting you to step forward? Right? It might be the altar guild. It might be the choir. It might be joining Alpha. It might be reaching out to others and inviting somebody to join you at church or an event or a program. It might be that the Spirit has placed in you a desire for an activity or a ministry. That you might be sitting there thinking, man, if only the church would do this. Well, maybe you are the person who is gifted to start that. What would it look like for you to engage in the place where you are being spiritually prompted? Because you are being spiritually gifted in the exact place where your love for Jesus and your love for others meet. So don't discount it. Don't minimize it. Don't lie to yourself and say that your gifts do not matter to the church. There's this wonderful scene in our gospel where Jesus takes the water used for purification and has the servant send it to the chief steward. And the water used for purification is what the guests of the wedding would have used to wash their hands, or where the servants would have used to wash the utensils after the meal. So it wasn't the cleanness of water, which is why John makes the specific point of saying the steward did not know where the water was from, but the servants did. Right? It's just dirty old water. And yet Jesus turns it into wine. When we think of our spiritual gifts, it can be easy to assume that we don't have anything much to offer. Right? We can kind of accept that false narrative that says, well, when it comes to me and my abilities and my gifts, that all that I offer are broken bricks and dirty water. But again, spiritual gifts, it's not just about you. It's not just about your temperament or your personality traits. It is about the Spirit of God working through you. And whenever you place yourself in the hands of Jesus, Anything you offer, as broken or as unkempt as it might be, is transformed into the miraculous. It is transformed into the very thing the community needs to receive the blessing of God. So you are poised to bless others in a way not experienced before. The Lord is waiting to perform something miraculous and something extraordinary through the exercising of your unique spiritual gift. So step forward in faith. Trust that the Lord empowers you. Trust that the Lord equips you. Trust that the Lord calls you. And trust that this church needs the specific gifts that you can offer. Amen.